What do you do when you're trapped in a loveless marriage with a woman who doesn't respect you, but you're trying to follow the Lord? So first of all, to the user that sent me this question, man, that is so tough, brother. And I just want to let you know my heart goes out to you because I know how hard that place is. I've counseled a number of men who've been in that situation, and it's hurtful and it sucks and it's hard. And so I just want you to know that you're seen, and that the Lord has compassion and He grieves with you over that situation. And so, yeah, man, just before I even answer anything, I just want to pause and acknowledge the difficult place that you're in. And I want to commend you for having the courage to try and walk in a godly manner, even despite the circumstances. That's a huge deal. There's a lot of lesser men who would not have done that. And so I just want to encourage you that it takes a lot of courage and it takes a lot of faith to even attempt what you're trying to attempt. And so let me now try and answer that question as best as I can. So the grounding answer is that our responsibilities to our wives are not predicated on their behaviors. So if a wife chooses not to submit to her husband, which is what she's commanded to do by the Lord, then the husband is not absolved of his responsibility to love her as Christ loves the church and to lay his life down on her behalf. Our responsibility remains regardless of her response to that responsibility. So that's the hard part. Now, there is a grace, if you will, that attends to the situation when you actually understand it. So having authority, and I just did a video about this for a young woman who's in kind of a reverse situation to yours. I might encourage you to check that one out, to be completely honest, because there's a lot of just good structure in there that may be helpful to you. But setting that aside, one thing that we have to remember as men is that our position is not predicated on our wife's response. So when you get married and take a wife, you become a husband. Husband is a role within an organization, just like CEO is a role within an organization. That organization is you and your wife. That's a structure that the relationship of the man and the woman who are within that structure operate within. So you have to think of marriage as sort of the box that the two people now live within. Marriage is not the relationship itself. And that's, I think, one of the biggest mistakes that we make, especially in modern culture, is that we have this idea that marriage is the relationship. Marriage is I like you, you like me, and let's spend together forever. That's folly. That's not what marriage is. Marriage before God is a covenant to stay together forever, to be faithful to one another, and to fulfill the roles and functions that God has placed in the earth for each one of us to fulfill. The husband is to love his wife as Christ loves the church and lay his life down for her in the same way that Christ laid his life down for the church. And the wife is to submit to the husband as unto the Lord, in the same way that the bride submits to Christ. This is why Paul says that there is a great mystery in marriage that pertains to Christ and the church. This is what the mystery is. The wife represents the bride, the husband represents Christ. When the wife submits to the husband, then it demonstrates in the earth the concept of the bride submitting to Christ. And when the husband lays down his life to protect the bride, then it demonstrates in the earth Christ laying down his life to protect the bride of Christ, which is the church. So when each of us fulfill the function that is designated to us as the in our biology, right? Because in Christ there is neither male nor female. Rather, we are beings that are spirit, and it seems like there's going to be some type of new body that spirit attends to. But Scripture makes it abundantly clear that in heaven we are neither male nor female. Rather, we're something else. And so this male and female representation that we occupy in our biology in the earth, those are archetypes to represent God's wisdom in the earth. Just like Christ in the earth as a flesh man was a temporary assignment. After he died, he was raised again in a new form that was both spirit and whatever the new version of his body was made of. And then he was seated at the right hand of the Father in heaven. So all of this is archetypes to help us understand the concept of Christ and the church. Now, this is important to understand because it lends a certain honor to the difficulty of loving a woman who is um, difficult to love, right? This happens sometimes. Sometimes even in a marriage where you've got an amazing wife, sometimes they're just difficult to love. Like that's the reality of being married to a human being, right? My wife sometimes has a hard time feeling like she should follow me because sometimes my leadership just sucks. And that's a reality. And I have to be humble enough to recognize that sometimes I suck as a leader and I got to go to her and be like, babe, I am so sorry. I suck right now and I get it and I'm trying and the Lord is working on me and just be patient with me, you know? And sometimes I have to go and be humble in that way with her. Just like sometimes she has to be humble with me and come be like, babe, I'm really sorry. Like I recognize I'm being very difficult to love right now, you know? And so we both have to be humble in the position that we have. But there's a dignity to bearing with a spouse who is not fulfilling their role and even doesn't want to when you understand what your position is representative of. When you love your wife as Christ loved the church and you lay down your life for her when she is like the most unlovable, you are demonstrating Christ in the earth at the greatest level because Christ moved first. He went to the cross when we were the most unlovable, when we were his absolute enemy, when the bride hated him enough to crucify him. That's when he went to the cross. He moved first on our behalf. And so when we as husbands love our wives when they are the most unlovable, we are sharing in the suffering of Christ in that moment, and we are demonstrating Christ in the earth for others. And that is such a powerful and dignified thing for a man to do. It is one of, if not the most honorable thing that you can do as a man, is to love your wife and to lay down your life for her when she is at her absolute worst, when she is the least lovable. That is one of the most honorable and dignified things that you can do as a man. But the reason it often doesn't feel honorable and dignified is because we allow their lack of submission to interfere with our understanding of our own power and authority. As a husband, you have God-given authority over your home. Whether your wife chooses to submit to you or not, it does not change your standing. It doesn't change the authority that you have in the house. It's like Moses, whenever I believe it was Korah rebelled, but I can't remember. But there were many times where the Lord was like, you know what? I'm all set with the Israelites. I'm just going to kill them all. And what did Moses do? Moses goes and he says, Lord, please don't. Like he stood in the gap on behalf of Israel. Now, this was during times that Israel was constantly complaining about Moses and trying to rebel and trying to overthrow him. And he prayed that the Lord would not destroy Israel when they were his very enemy. Why? Because Moses understood that his position was not predicated on the people following him. His position was appointed by God. And it's not affected by whether anyone or everyone submits to you. You could have the whole world submit to you and have absolutely no authority whatsoever because all authority is appointed by God. And if you are not appointed, it doesn't matter if everyone in the world wants to follow you. You have no authority. But if the Lord appoints you as an authority, then you have authority whether anyone in the world submits to it. And this is of the utmost importance for us as men to get our heads around, because when we get into that place where we start allowing our identity to be dictated by our wives' behavior, we get into this place where we start to kind of feel neutered and powerless. And then we start to act neutered and powerless. And you've seen men who act like this. They become catty and they become, or they become cruel, right? Usually you go in one direction or another. The thing is that when a man truly understands that he is powerful, that he does have authority that is given by God to rule over his home, regardless of whether his wife is submitting to that rule or not, then it allows you to be unaffected by her position so that you can be free to pray on her behalf, because her fighting your authority is actually to her detriment. Because by fighting your authority, she is rejecting God's authority. And that's not good for her. In the same way, when Israel rejected Moses' authority, they were rejecting God's authority, and that was not good for them. But if we are not secure in our own position in the Lord, then what will happen is instead we will pray against where they are, and we will actually leave them unprotected when our very job is to protect them both spiritually and naturally. And we'll leave them unprotected out of anger instead of stepping in the gap and praying on their behalf that they would turn, because in their rebellion, they are actually setting themselves up for more harm. And we don't have to take their lack of submission as an affront to our person, because their lack of submission has nothing to do with our authority. Now, that's the structural part. The relational part, which I talked about earlier, that lives within the box of the relationship. But the relational part will never be able to be healthy until both people are willing to take on the structure that the marriage has. The structure is what protects the relationship. That's why the relationship gets into such a bad place whenever both or one of the people is not functioning within the role and assignment that God has given them within that particular architecture. Okay, so I know I said a lot, and I just want to kind of like bring this all the way back to the personal side of things, because outside of all of this structure and architecture and framework and everything that I just gave you, there's still a person, which is you, in this situation, feeling all of the hurt that comes with it. Because I know a wife that is in the position that you're describing, man, they can be cruel, and that is super hurtful. And I just want to encourage you to stay soft and to stay humble and to just lean on the Lord and to be gracious and to remember that there is tremendous dignity in bearing up under unwarranted hatred, especially when you are demonstrating Christ. And that is what is happening if you are loving your wife as Christ loved the church. If you're laying down your life on her behalf, even when she is the most unlovable, that is one of the most dignified things you can do, man. And so, dude, I just want to encourage you. And again, I know how hard this is, and I know how hurtful it is. And I'm sorry that you're going through that, and that sucks so much. And I just want you to know that I mean, if nobody else sees you, man, I see you, and I see your humility and your courage to reach out and even ask this question. And so I hope this is helpful. Of course, if there's anything else I can speak on that would help you navigate this, I know this is a sticky and difficult situation. So if there's anything else I can speak on that you think would help, don't hesitate to comment or DM me, and I'll try and speak on it as quickly as I can.